And in terms of the sectors that you think are most promising for sustainable investment opportunities, we would love you to just share your thoughts on that. I think there's a number of different sectors here. We know this doesn't necessarily capture everything, but I think these are some of the main sectors in the economies in which we work. Of course, agriculture is a huge part of all of the economies that we work in here in Africa. Agriculture, food and beverage. Yeah, we're seeing a lot in healthcare, education and renewable resources, alternative energy. These are also really big ones. Tech and communications, we'll touch on that later. I think ICT, more than ever, we're looking for ways to stay connected. We're looking for ways to share information. We're looking for new ways to be working and really relying on telecom to kind of innovate and keep up with that in terms of infrastructure. Agriculture continues to be a main one, and renewable energy we're seeing as well. Yeah, really great to see all that. Thank you, David. I think we can move on to the last question here. And what do you see as the greatest barrier to investing in SDG opportunities? I think everybody knows, investment requires a lot of due diligence, a lot of thoughtfulness, but what do you see as the main barriers for investing in SDG opportunities? So these things related to the Sustainable Development Goals. Would love to hear your perceptions here. So looking at, it's the first one we're hearing, the first two we're seeing really is that trade-off between the financial returns and the impact case. Lack of knowledge around sustainable investment opportunities was just overtaken by lack of tools and frameworks to measure the impact that we're seeing. A lack of knowledge is something that's also being observed here, and development of pipelines. So kind of that gap between an available pipeline and the capital. Limited resources is low. I think perceived risks is still quite low, but definitely it looks like the top one here is around that trade-off of returns versus impact, and feeling that maybe sometimes those are not always. I think that there's a lot of potential for both to be achieved in a lot of models. Thank you so much, David. I think this is a great opportunity just to get a quick check from everybody in the room on what we're thinking going into this. So now let's see how these inputs relate to what UNDP has found through its study of investors late last year. So approximately 100 private and public stakeholders were polled, were spoken to, research was done with them. And what we saw was that the rapid assessment that was conducted in June through September of 2020 established that private sector investors and financial institutions are unsurprisingly extremely concerned about the pandemic. I think top concerns as highlighted here are the recession, the potential for recession, economic recession, uncertainty, reduced productivity, among others. However, the good news is that almost none of the surveyed investors had actually stopped their investment activities, only 3 out of 60. And I think now more than ever, we need investment to the continent. Stopping investment is not going to help on the economic impact. So it's great to see that most of the investors recognize this and have continued to make investments in the continent. What we can see, however, is that there are changing priorities. So where essential sectors such as solar power, telecommunications, they have an increased demand, whereas other sectors that were more dependent on consumer interactions or international supply chains have taken a real hit. In terms of resilient business models, we've learned that those with high capital expenditure requirements are more tailored towards long-term recovery. Whereas business models that require less upfront investments, such as telemedicine, are probably more appropriate for short-term response. So as we've seen over the last year, there are so many opportunities in the digital space as well, such as digitization and e-platforms. So finally, as we move into the sustainable development opportunities, which is really the focus of today's discussion and where the SDG Investor Maps help us to obtain insights, the UNDP COVID-19 rapid assessment shows us there's a variety of sectors across the countries that have priority for investment. So with these initial findings in mind, we want to move into the official opening of the session, and I have the pleasure to invite Dr. Ayodele Adusola from UNDP in South Africa. Dr. Adusola is a respected economist with a long history of leadership within UNDP, where he has led the preparation of flagship reports, including a report on the socioeconomic impact of Ebola. He has also provided intellectual leadership across the continent in collaboration with some of UN's key partners, such as the African Union. He now serves as the head of UNDP South Africa and is also the director of the organization's Africa Finance Sector Hub, which houses SDG Impact. He will talk about the pressing development needs, SDG financing opportunities, and his own rich experience in spearheading the SDG Investor Maps on the continent. Welcome, Dr. Adesola.
Thank you very much, Erin. And thanks, Augustine, all the speakers that have been invited here, representative from government, the representative from the entrepreneurs and investors, the representative from both bilateral and multilateral partners, my colleagues from the UN, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure to be with you today. And I want to say a big thank you for really coming to witness this particular event, Africa SANCAP Summit 2021. And this is something that we in UNDP, with partners of like mind, thought that we need to really use to really promote impact investment globally. Thank you for the golden opportunities you have given to all the organizers for you to be here. But I just want to really appreciate the partners that have been here, particularly the IntelCap. The partners that are part of this particular initiative have really contributed immensely. I just want to mention a few of them. The Alpha Mundi, the Ghana Venture Capital Trust Fund, the Helium Health, Open Capital, Authors Africa Capital, and some other partners that are here and those that I will be speaking today. This event wouldn't be what it has been planned to be without your presence. I just want to really acknowledge your presence. I cannot mention the names one by one, but I want to collectively appreciate all of you because you are sowing the seed that will continue to germinate even before we did this particular event. I just want to really echo the objectives of today's event. And I will group it under 4 different categories. And the first one is for us to bring stakeholders together. Like I've mentioned right from the beginning, the government representatives that have been here, the entrepreneurs, the investors, the innovators, development partners, as well as some others, not only within, but also outside the United Nations system. There is no way we can advance the goal of achieving the Sustainable Development Goal by 2030 without your contributions. The second objective is for us to really see how can we collectively contribute to what we call the triple bottom lines. The triple bottom lines where private organizations are not only focusing on economic profits, but also they are thinking on how to align economic profits to social profit and environmental profits. The 3 main pillars of the Sustainable Development Goal and 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So we thought this is really very important. The third one is for us to really exhibit through this impact investment map the role of UNDP as the SDG integrator based on the resolutions passed to United Nations Development Program by the United Nations General Assembly. So the idea is for us to really serve as integrator of SDGs on the ground in 176 countries where we operate as we speak today. Essentially, our idea is how do we bring actors together? That's one of the roles of the integrator. How do we bring the various themes? And I so much like the first, the question and answer that we all responded to, where we're talking about the trade-offs. Now, in SDG era, unlike the Millennium Development Goals era, MDG era, where we only focus on synergy, now we focus on trade-offs. And trade-off happened to be one of the major challenges you mentioned. And that's where the role of UNDP is as an integrator. So also, the objective of this particular event is to connect. How can UNDP and other development partners connect the business communities to the SDGs as well as to Agenda 2063? I just want to let you know that UNDP, while I was still at the headquarters, did a survey, a study that shows the alignment between the Sustainable Development Goals and the African Union Agenda 2063 that shows us that they are 90% aligned. We did also the alignment between the Sustainable Development Goals and the African Development Bank's high fives. The issue of feed the nation, feed the continent, electrify the continent, industrialize the continent, integrate the continent, and enhance the well-being of Africans. So it's 85% aligned. So it's an indication that any effort to focus on the achievement of the SDGs is not only helping to achieve the overall goal of Africa as a continent, but also some of the National Development Plan priorities that have been articulated. So, ladies and gentlemen, the impact of COVID-19 is what I want to use as a springboard of today's event. Because without COVID-19, we will be meeting physically. And COVID-19, as we all know, has changed so many things and has brought new normals. And part of the things it changes is the way we behave, the way we do business, and the way we govern. And as a result of this is one of the reality on the ground, that virtual meeting is now the new normal as opposed to physical meeting, which I think is really good because we are contributing to what they call the carbon reduction in carbon footprints. Because if we are meeting in one place, the carbon emission that will be associated with our traveling, with so many things we do, will have contributed to the climate change challenges we have today. But again, that's one of the opportunities associated with COVID-19. I just want to really let you know that the impact of what started at public health just late 2019 has turned to be multiple crises. Not only social crisis, economic crisis, but in some situations, political crisis. And we strongly believe that with the current reality on the ground, we will be able to learn from the lessons of COVID-19. As you all know, Africa was projected to decline in terms of gross domestic product by 3% in 2020. And so many other African countries, particularly those that depend on tourism as the engine of growth, countries like Mauritius, countries like Seychelles, countries like Cabo Verde, they are losing more than 10% in growth of economic activities. And even in South Africa, where I am, where based on the result UNDP did last year, South Africa was projected to lose close to 7 to 9% of its GDP, and it has. The evidence from IMF, the evidence from the World Bank has shown that the projection from UNDP concerning South Africa is really right. So it's really, the impact is quite profound at the macro level. And if you look at the micro level and sectoral level, the impact on small scale businesses is huge. The impact on the informal sector is huge. And the impact on the households in terms of income, livelihood, it's really, really huge. But the essence of having gatherings like you, people of like mind, is how can we turn this crisis into opportunities? And that's the role we play as in UNDP as SDG integrator. Well, the other objective is that based on what we do, we think we need to really bring all the actors together, from the private sector to the government, from also to CSOs and development partners, is how can we reflect on how to turn crises to opportunities? And don't forget, one of the greatest quotes of today, particularly linked to Winston Churchill, is never waste the opportunities in any crisis. There is crisis here today, COVID-19, but UNDP as SDG integrator's role is to think on how we can turn the crisis into opportunities. And that's why we are talking about impact investment. That's one of the things which I think is really very important for us to really do. And the idea is we are bringing all actors together, actors from private sector, actors from public sector, actors from international development communities and CSOs, is for us to co-create and co-own development solutions, and particularly investment funds. And that's why we're here today. And I strongly believe, based on the role the UNDP has been playing, for instance, in setting up the Accelerator Lab, which we started middle of 2019 in 70 countries with 60 labs, but gradually we are close to 100 labs now. And the idea is for us to really see how we use innovation to drive development, how we use innovation to really improve the well-being of the people, how we use innovation to promote shared prosperity. And that's one of the things which I think the ideas of bringing all the knowledgeable people that know where the shoes pinch on the ground together is for us to collectively co-create and collectively co-own development solutions. And this takes me to the reason why we have the UNDP Global Finance Sector Hub. The idea is for us to really let's look at finance as an ingredient of development, and that we cannot just combine it with many other things. The idea why we separated it from UNDP's side is for us to be more focused and see the centrality of finance in development. And as a result of this, the African Finance Sector Hub was established to be able to play this particular role, funding for the idea for us to move from funding to financing. Second, the idea for us collectively to promote blended financing so that it's not just government alone, it's not the private sector alone, but a combination of all. Also to promote the role of private sector, and also to see how we can collectively work together to achieve what they call integrated national financial frameworks, and also finally to promote impact investment that will help us to really address some of the things that we do on the continent. UNDP is really doing a lot of things, particularly when it comes to the issue of impact investment. And I just want to really re-echo the issue we mentioned concerning this idea of bringing ideas together for us to really promote inclusive growth and development. Now, the SDG is there, but the financing gap is huge. And I'm sure so many of the people that are here today in this particular meeting might have read a lot of things in terms of what is required to finance the Sustainable Development Goals globally, ranging from 5 to 7 trillions on an annual basis. And in Africa, it's been projected to be an average of about 600 billion, where it's been estimated to be about 11.5% of the gross domestic product. It's really one of the things in terms of what is needed on an annual basis. But again, if you look at the financing gap in developing countries, it's about 2.5 trillion. But I just want to let you know that it may look as if it's very huge, but if we all collectively end illicit financial flows, that is more than 50% of what is needed to finance the SDG, particularly in Africa. I think it's going to be a way forward, and we will have a lot of opportunities for us to promote investment. One of the things that you have rightly known, the President Thabo Mbeki's report that put an average of about 50 billion that flows out of the country in terms of illicit financial flows. And just last year, UNCTAD published another report that shows that the average illicit financial flows leaving the shore of Africa is $88.6 billion every year. This is huge if you are able to block and stop this. So it shows the imperative of domestic resource mobilization, which we need in taking this particular initiative forward. But I strongly believe that the reason why we bring everybody together here is bridging the gap through what they call stakeholders collaboration. And that's why UNDP is partnering with all the speakers here, all their organizations, and those that are participating in this particular event today, for us to really see how we can push the frontier to bridge the gap of financing the SDG. And again, this is one of the reasons why we are so passionate about pushing the frontier of SDG impact investment, which, like I mentioned earlier on, has gained a lot of currency over the past 5 years, where it's been growing at an average of 17% per annum over this period. And the Sub-Saharan African countries seems to be playing a very solid role, coming next after North America in terms of impact investment. And I think we're doing well, but we're not yet there. We're just on the right path. But with the kind of support we are getting from all of you, it becomes an opportunity for us to really accelerate progress. And in this regard, the UNDP Finance Sector Hub that really initiated the SDG Impact Initiative, and I so much want to really thank David and other colleagues, Elizabeth and co, for making this a reality on the ground. The idea is for us to really use this particular initiative to really promote market intelligence tools to identify investable funds and also to mobilize private capital. So we count on your experience, because I know all the people that will be speaking in this particular event are extremely knowledgeable when it comes to investment and impact investment for that matter. And this takes me to the role of the African Finance Sector Hub. Here, as the resident representative for UNDP for South Africa and the director for African Finance Sector Hub, I just want to give you the examples of what we have done in South Africa on this Impact Investor Map, which we did last year. And well, it happened to be the first to be done in Africa and also the first to be launched globally. I know it was done in Brazil earlier, but it was not launched until after we've done ours. So, but essentially what is really important about what we did in South Africa is for us to build on the power, on the political asset of public-private partnership. Because what we did was to set up a kind of a steering committee of private sector actors, including so many, the chair of whatever South Africa Impact Investment Fund, also the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and so many key actors in the society under the leadership of government, also with other development partners. This gave us the opportunity to have something that could be co-owned by all stakeholders. And we focus on 4 key sectors. The first is in the area of infrastructure, the second is in the area of healthcare system, the third is in the area of education, and the fourth is in the area of food and beverages, an integral subsector of agriculture. And we divided these 4 sectors into 11 subsectors. And at the end, we were able to identify 30 investment opportunity areas that the internal rate of return ranges from 7 to 17%. And there are a few outliers in terms of that. It shows that in South Africa, there are so many investment opportunities that are even higher than the global average in terms of internal rate of returns. The government was so enthused about this, and we have initiated efforts to translate some of these things into actions. One of the next steps is for us to have some kind of dialogue session. And again, as a result of this, it was one of the very few reports that was mentioned in the last investment map, investment summit, chaired by the president of the country. And I think it shows that we are really contributing and making the impact that is needed for us to really transform the SDG impact on the globe. But I just want to really mention that shortly after we did that, the implementation and the conduct of this particular assessment has gone into full-blown operations across all the various regions in Africa. And as I speak today, 5 additional countries have joined. We have Ghana, we have Kenya, we have Nigeria, we have Rwanda, and we have Uganda. And some of this, you'll be seeing some kind of case studies that will guide some of the deliberations in the breakout sessions shortly. But I just want to let you know that this SDG Impact Investor Map has brought a lot of tractions and has elicited a lot of interest from many actors in terms of making concrete impact on the ground. Now, the opportunities in today's session, I just want to use in concluding this process, is that it helps us to introduce SDG Impact investment. And particularly based on those 2 countries you'll be using as case studies, Kenya as well as Nigeria. And don't forget, we will, my colleagues are there to share the South African experience because it's very deep and very, very result-oriented, and it has a lot of policy derivatives that are coming out of it. And also to introduce the SDG Investment Platform, which is a digital engine platform, also a platform that is serving as one-stop solution for knowledge, training, and matchmaking. I really, really recommend this particular tool that is helping us to really identify a lot of opportunities in the market and is serving as market intelligence for investors to make effective use of. And also to let you know that it is through this particular initiative that UNDP is able to play its role as what they call his convening power, a comparative advantage, his coordinating advantage, and catalytic comparative advantage in the sense that we have catalyzed the power of the tool of this digital engine platform, the investment map, which is serving as a market intelligence tool. That is one of the roles that UNDP is mandated to deliver on as one of the as the SDG integrator on the ground. I just want to really enjoin you to please formalize yourself with the SDG Impact Investment Map. Also familiarize yourself with the platform, because it's going to be, with your support, is going to be something that will change the landscape of investment, especially the impact investment, not only in Africa, but also in the world. And I just want to again enjoin you to please actively participate in this event, because it is through your active participation we'll be able to know the value of this engagement. And finally, to tell you that UNDP is there to walk the journey with you and to serve as partner of choice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adesola. We appreciate your remarks as well as sharing the expansive work the UNDP is doing to drive economic development, especially during this time of crisis. And really looking forward to, as you said, getting to know the SDG Investor Maps better in these breakout sessions. With that, I'll also note, Marcus and Leo, thank you very much for the questions you've shared in the chat, and we look forward to taking those up in the breakout session. I'd now like to hand it over to Devahuti Chuduri from the SDG Impact. She'll introduce the investor maps and explain its methodology. She's an investor map specialist based out of Delhi and has been leading the development and implementation of the tool in India. Over to you, Devahuti.
Thank you so much, Erin, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today as I take you through the SDG Investor Maps. I'll be very quick, but with that quick introduction, I do hope that you will be able to sort of move the discussion forward with this intelligence in hand. Next slide, please, David. So SDG Impact, has 3 pillars of work, and this is essentially inspired by the fact that there is a huge financing gap for the SDGs across the globe. It stands at about $5 to $7 trillion, according to a UNCTAD report. And for emerging markets, a lot of the countries in Africa, for instance, fall in that category. It is about $2.5 million each year as we move towards the 2030 deadline. This gap has even widened even more, and therefore SDG Impact's work becomes extremely pertinent. So in terms of three pillars, we're looking at impact management, where SDG Impact drives impact standards and impact seal and training so that investors and enterprises can authenticate their work and see how they're contributing towards the SDGs. The second pillar, which is impact intelligence, which we'll shortly dive into, is looking at producing data and insights that are needed for increasing financial flows to the SDGs. And finally, impact facilitation is where UNDP brings together stakeholders from the government, from different development agencies, as well as the private sector, to use tools such as the SDG Investor Maps and do convenings so that policies can be modeled towards, better financing towards the SDGs. There can be more enabling environment where SDG financing can be driven, and of course, with impact metrics being achieved at the end and as the final goal. So coming and diving right into the SDG Investor Maps, this is one of my favorite slides where we try to explain what does the map actually do. So this is a funnel process where, we try to look at, and we start from looking at priority sectors and the national priorities for a particular country at a very broad level, where we try and distill and compare what are the national priorities in terms of development needs for a particular country and their context. How is the government and the political system driving those priorities? And thirdly, where does the private sector fit in? So how do we bring together those, and then we try and distill what are therefore the sectors and the subsectors where there are some opportunities for the private sector. Next, what we look at is we look at driving the critical subsectors where there is a development need, but there is also a very strong push from the policy end, as well as a favorable investment momentum. This next takes us to identifying the regions. Now, I'll just take you to India, where it's a huge country. There is a lot of diversity in terms of provincial and state level, the regional diversity, and therefore it's very important that when you look at a subsector and a sector, where is this region? What regions do they play in? This also means looking at urban areas, peri-urban areas, rural areas, apart from the different regional diversity therein. So with that, we finally come to the crux of the investor maps, which is essentially looking at, what are the investment opportunity areas which serve both a high development need within each sector. There is a strong political push in order to move investments in that sector, and that there is already some investment activity happening. So you see a lot of business models that are already at play, or business models that are coming up. And that information that becomes very interesting for us to showcase to investors through the investor map. Can we move to the next slide, David? Great. So there is a lot of curiosity around what is it that the investor maps actually showcase. So here you will see that, for each of the business models, or each of the rather investment opportunity areas that we highlight in the investor map, we are able to offer 20 actionable data points that span different business and impact considerations. I may not be able to take you through all of them, but just if we look at business case metrics, some of the things that we are able to capture for each of the investment opportunity areas are things such as, what is the market size, and is the environment in terms of financial environment, regulatory environment, partner environment, is it favorable for the growth of the investment opportunity area? What are the current return profiles that the investors are already realizing by investing into these investment opportunities? Within what time frame, short term, medium term, or long term, are the investors able to realize returns? What is the kind of ticket size? So that really helps you sift through what kind of investors would be interested in an opportunity like this. For instance, pension funds would be looking at some really large ticket projects versus domestic small private equity firms, which are ready to sort of experiment with short term and a more quick, small ticket sort of investment, for a particular investment opportunity area. And finally, what we also look at are market risks. and what are some of the obstacles to scale. This could be due to externalities lying within a particular context, so this could also be because of the nature of the investment itself. And I did see a lot of questions and interest around the impact case. So that is a huge part of what the investor maps are. We look at, what is a sustainable need that the investment opportunity area is looking at? What kind of development outcome can you realize? What are the SDGs and SDG indicators that a particular opportunity serves? And finally, we use a gold standard in order to figure out whether the business model in a particular investment opportunity area is simply acting to avoid harm, or is actually benefiting the stakeholders, and finally, is it contributing to a particular solution that is required to outpace a development problem? So these are the kind of metrics that you will see as investment maps come out for different countries. Can we move to the next slide, David? So this is simply the 8-step methodology that we use in order to arrive at the information that I already shared with you. So what you will see, and I'll not take time to go through all of this since we have some really exciting breakout sessions coming up. But what is important for us to see here is that it's an extremely consultative process. At each stage, we go out to government agencies, we go out to development agencies, including civil society organizations, and then we also go to a host of investors. These could be venture capital firms, these could be private equity firms, large pension funds, to ensure that everybody's perspectives are taken in, and that we also have a very holistic way of approaching how these investment opportunity areas are first identified, and also then finally presented to investors through the investor map. I'll just take a moment here to also mention that, there was this very interesting question in the chat that maybe the financing gap would also be because certain business models are not finance ready, or they're not able to accept financing at this point in time. And that is something that the investor maps also highlight, where we look at white areas, which are essentially areas which are very exciting for investors, but they don't see any viable business models yet. So we, as in our effort to document the entire panorama of investment opportunity areas, also document these particular areas, which maybe in a 2-3 year time frame, or even in a longer time frame, will see business models and can be then looked at by the investors. Next slide, please. And finally, here I would echo what Dr. Odusala was also mentioning, that how do you see UNDP playing a role in sort of creating these investor maps and bringing together different actors? So apart from the global presence that UNDP already has, one of the key roles that we see UNDP playing is also that of a knowledge broker. UNDP's ability to bring together different actors in a particular market ecosystem, which includes government, which includes private sector players, which includes the civil society organizations, bringing them to the same table, discussing and thrashing out, what are the gaps in the ecosystem because of which investments are not happening, or are not happening at the pace as they should in order to reach the 2030 agenda, is really the power that UNDP brings as they convene the different actors together. So with that, I'll hand back to Erin. I'm sorry if this was very quick, but I'm happy to take over questions through the chat box. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Devahuti. I'd now like to welcome David Moeller, who's also from SDG Impact. David is an SDG Impact Map specialist based out of Nairobi, and he'll give us an update on the progress of the SDG Investor Maps in Sub-Saharan Africa and share some of the early trends we've observed across the continent. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you, colleagues. Just real quick, I think we've heard already a lot of this information, but we have completed maps in 6 African countries. We're also busy now doing the SDG Investor Maps in Namibia and Malawi, and we actually have an exciting networking session as part of Sankalp on Thursday at 2:30 that will present initial results from Namibia. So maybe you can also join us for that. And as mentioned also by Devahuti, as part of also the ongoing processes in Africa, we have done extensive consultations, and we've had already some launches, as also Dr. Ayo indicated. We've also had facilitation events where we started to bring together investors, and actually we also have one planned in Ghana for next week on the 10th of March. So that could be a great opportunity for you to listen in and see what that facilitation event looks like. We also have additional maps in the pipeline, as you can see on the continent, on the map of the continent. But in terms of, before we actually dive into the data, and I think that's really where then the exciting discussions will start, but we just wanted to frame this a little bit and show you that we have some results emerging from the 6 African countries that have done the SDG Investor Map so far. We definitely see that food and beverage or agriculture, as well as infrastructure, are sort of key priority sectors across the countries, as well as healthcare and education that also play a key role in all of those 6 countries. We also have similar types of opportunities within the countries. So for example, these kind of opportunities that help to address the challenge of post-harvest losses or provide affordable housing solutions. Those are something that comes across in different countries. But besides these commonalities, we also see some particular focuses, especially in South Africa, regarding education and healthcare opportunities, such as low fee private schooling, or in Kenya, for example, we see a lot of opportunities around agriculture, and we'll hear more about that later on. In Nigeria, on the other hand, and West Africa, I think we also see sort of an emphasis on renewable energy and a couple of other interesting sectors around and opportunities around solar and wind opportunities. So just as a real brief sort of snapshot of what we see across the region, and I'll hand back to Erin, who is going to prepare us for the parallel sessions.
Thank you, David. And with this additional context on the SDG Investor Maps, we'll now move into the breakout sessions and study some of the emerging data in more detail. So as mentioned before, we have 2 panels today. I will be facilitating the East Africa panel, which will focus on agriculture, infrastructure, and transportation sectors in Kenya. And my co-facilitator, Augustine Ndungu, who's from Endeavour Kenya, will be facilitating the West Africa panel, and that will focus on renewable resources, healthcare, and infrastructure sectors in Nigeria. So based on your geographical preference or your sectoral preference, feel free to choose which session you would like to be in. So as you can see, as you should be able to see on your screen now, if not shortly, you'll have the option to select which panel you'd like to join. And we will have about 25 minutes. So we'll plan to reconvene here in the main room to wrap up the session at 2:20 p.m. East African time.
Okay, so we are back. Yes, Erin, we are back with the team from Nigeria as well. So over to you for this closing session.
Welcome back, everybody. We hope that you all had a great parallel session. I know we did in East Africa. So I know we only have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to move through this quickly. But we would like to do kind of a final poll here. I think, David, are we going to go ahead and do the final poll here just to get a sense of maybe where people's views on this have now changed or shifted over the last hour? So in one word, please summarize, what is your takeaway from the parallel session? What stood out for you? I know in the East Africa parallel session, we were talking about how to de-risk investment on the continent, especially with smaller ticket sizes, and how to leverage tools such as the SDG Investor Maps to understand what's happening in the sector. Maybe Augustine would love to hear 1 or 2 sound bites from what you guys covered in the West Africa session.
Right. So I think from our session, one of the interesting points that came up was basically the fact that on one hand, while it covers all the sectors, they are not necessarily, we were not able to dive deep into all of the sectors. So let's say, for example, agriculture, which is very big for West Africa. So we encourage everyone to really take a time to play with the tool, get to know it, and look at all the other different sectors and investment opportunity areas that have been highlighted, as well as we had a quick discussion on the depth of the investor mapping itself. How can you basically map which investment goes to which, let's say, community, especially at the BOP level. So there is some level of feedback there that we think will be helpful also for continuously developing and improving on the tool as well. Very exciting conversation there. And also the highlight on health, let's say e-health as one of the major areas for investment, e-pharmacy as well. So there are some really new and exciting areas to look into moving forward, but definitely encourage everyone to take a moment and use the tool once it's available.
Great, thank you so much, Augustine. I think we're just going to skip to the last question here. Again, we want to ask, what was the greatest barrier to investing in SDG opportunities? This was something that we discussed kind of earlier.
Augustine, did Erin freeze?
I think yes, or her internet may have dropped off. So while we wait for Erin to come, let's just quickly highlight some of these. What I find interesting here actually is the fact that there's a disconnect between available pipeline and capital is now the top sort of barrier that we've seen. And this actually highlights again the value and the purpose of this tool because it helps to bridge this gap between ideas and capital. So that's one interesting point that I see. Lack of tools and frameworks to measure and actually authenticate the impact itself. That's interesting to see. And I find the lack of tailored or innovative investment vehicles as the least challenging one, which really is interesting to see because the perception that we actually do have the capital and we do have the opportunities and the challenges where this capital can be deployed really highlights the fact that this tool helps to solve one of the most common challenges or barriers to investing in SDGs in the market. Trade-offs have dropped off to 5th point, which is interesting as well. But I find that it's interesting that it came right above basically the broadly or limited interest in sustainable investing, which I also feel is a very, very good shift in our thinking, just because the focus on SDGs and impact needs to stay top of mind, as we've said, post-COVID current scenario. So thank you so much for your interesting comments there. And we really encourage you to continue sharing your insights and reflections as we continue to engage with the SDG impact maps or impact investor maps. So this data, I think, David, yes, we can highlight where the map will actually be available. So I think if you go to the SDG, maybe David, you could share for us quickly how the SDG Investor Maps will be available in terms of timeline.
Yeah, thank you, Augustine. So just we are conscious of time, but if you allow us another 5 minutes, we'll just give you a bit of an insight, actually a fairly exclusive one on where the current platform stands. So it's called SDG Investment Platform. We've heard about it. It's really going to be our way of presenting and making accessible the data. So as you enter the platform, you'll have an overview in terms of what it actually offers. And then at the center of it really are the investment opportunity areas, which then gives you an overview in terms of what the specific information are, who sort of the stakeholder could be, the audience for this map. But if we dive right into the sort of meat of it, we'll see on the right side the different investment opportunity areas. But before I go into that, I also want to show that you'll be able to actually filter the opportunities as per your needs. So for example, if you're specifically interested in just these 3 countries and these 3 sectors, that would be a great way of making the data and information as targeted for you as possible. And when I say you, it's really the investors and any other type of stakeholders. Importantly, this is being provided as a public good, so it's going to be accessible to anyone. But then if we dive into one of those investment opportunity areas, just to give you an idea of how it looks like, first, a summary of all the data that we have seen in the infographics during the presentation, looking at the partner environment, so opportunities for collaboration, looking at the different economic factors, looking into even more specifically the target locations beyond the country. So what are the specific regions that could be very particularly interesting for a particular investment opportunity, going all the way into the impact case, summarizing the SDG connection and who is actually going to be targeted and impacted by those opportunities. So really a wealth of information. And we hope that this platform is also going to make it easy for investors to actually access it and also build connections, because there's also going to be an opportunity to actually log in and connect both with investors and ourselves. And maybe just one last piece that I think is really interesting is that you can also compare investment opportunity areas. So if you think these are really interesting, but you want to see which one is most suits your needs, you can look at them next to each other. So just a quick preview, fairly exclusive, first time in the public, but we'll share that definitely in the coming weeks once it's actually launched publicly. And before we close, I just also want to emphasize that besides that SDG Investment Platform, we also have 2 ways of facilitating the uptake of the data. On the one hand, that's the SDG Impact Investor Convenings, where we really try to bring together investors and businesses, oftentimes also national and international investors, to actually matchmake and realize those opportunities, so to actually mobilize the capital. On the other hand, with the SDG Impact Policy Dialogues, we also want to use our close proximity with the public sector to bring investors to the government and look into enabling environment opportunities and challenges for the investment opportunities. And before I hand back over to Erin for closing, just again to emphasize that we are really keen to collaborate with all of you. Thank you very much for the inputs. I think just to highlight that we have another session on spotlighting Namibia on Thursday at 2:30. So please join us for that, for results from that country. And we also have a couple of interesting events coming up outside of Sankalp. For example, in Ghana on the 10th of March, we'll have a facilitation event, and please do not hesitate to reach out to us on the regional, the global level. And then we also have country offices across the continent who are eager to explore potential opportunities around the SDG Investor Maps. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. I think it's great to know that the SDG Impact offers the assistance to facilitate access to this market intelligence. The maps look great. The website looks great. I think I speak for everybody here in saying we're really excited for that to be made available and publicly. So I'm looking forward to using that across the continent. Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to close this session. I know we've gone a few minutes over, so thank you to everybody who has managed to stay behind for these last few minutes and to participate in the session. I'd like to thank all of our contributors and appreciate their support, including Alpha Mundi, Endeavor, the Ghana Venture Capital Trust Fund, Helium Health, Open Capital Advisors, Ortis Africa Capital, and the United Nations and UNDP, and the SDG Impact team. Please do not hesitate to contact the SDG Impact team. You can see their information here on this slide, all of their, the website, as well as all of their addresses, their email addresses. So please reach out to them so you can explore how to collaborate on this opportunity. You can also find more information, as mentioned earlier, at their exhibitors booth here at Sankalp at the virtual conference platform. So please stop by there. And thank you all for your time. We wish you have a wonderful week ahead and enjoy the conference. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and do enjoy the day.
Thanks, Erin. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.